My name is Yui Yoshiro, and I'm 43 years old. I'm just an average housewife. Today I'd like to tell you about something horrible that happened to a family member. In this day and age, it feels like dangers are hidden everywhere, even the most unlikely places. So I hope that hearing this story will help you raise awareness in your own communities. I live in a house in a normal neighborhood with my husband and our son and daughter. My husband, Yutaro, is the same age as me and is working in an office. Our daughter, Mio, is still in her freshman year of high school. And our son, Ryo, is in 3rd grade. We don't have any major problems at home, and I think we get along pretty well. Our children are really good kids. Even though she's reached puberty, our daughter hasn't shown any extreme rebelliousness. And her teenage years have been pretty peaceful, so my husband and I are really thankful for that. Next, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who's going to be a key person in the story. Mr. Makishima, how are you this evening? I've made too much stew today, so I'd be really happy if you'd eat some. It's got plenty of vegetables and the meat's nice and soft.
Really? Thank you so much, Yui. You're too kind. Your stew is always delicious. I can't wait to have dinner.
This old man is called Mr. Makishima. He's in his 70s and he lives in a house that's a few doors down the street. He's held tutoring lessons over the past few years, and both my son and daughter have been to his lessons at one point, so we're very close neighbors. Mom, look at this! Mr. Makishima gave me oranges to bring home. There's so many. He did? I've got to go thank him. Maybe I should take some curry. Good thing I made extra just in case. Let's go take it to him. I want to go too. I want to see Mr. Makishima. Take me with you. All right. Let's go together. Get your shoes on. Mr. Makishima is really kind-hearted and soft-spoken, so my kids are really fond of him. We have a relationship similar to the kind of relationship you'd have with a relative, like an uncle or grandfather. We were living peacefully and happily until one day the arrival of a certain someone in the neighborhood changed everything. Our lives were turned upside down by a single person, and you're never going to believe what they did for a living. Can't we do something about him? He's being way too dictatorial. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah. Even I ended up being questioned for no reason the other day. It would still be tolerable if he was just rude.
Ryo is really afraid of him ever since he was shouted at.
But this is crossing too many lines. There's nothing we can do about him. He's a police officer.
His predecessor was such a lovely person. I wonder if they were transferred elsewhere.
The new guy looks pretty young, and I would be surprised if he had a family with an attitude like that.
Is there someone we could complain to? Get them to help us?
There might be, but I doubt they'll be that reliable. The guy's a part of the police force. The worst punishment he'll get is a slap on the wrist and a good telling off. But that won't change anything. We've got nothing on him until he actually commits a crime.
Why hasn't anybody in the police force realized how bad he is yet? The man we were talking about was a police officer who had been newly assigned to the local station while he was out on patrol. The man's name was Yabu. He was in his mid-20s and he looked like any other police officer in their uniform if he didn't speak. But it was his attitude that was the problem. He was rude, arrogant, and incredibly obnoxious. For example, Yabu had stopped my husband once when he was on his way home from work.
Hey, you there, old man! Stop right there! Show me what you've got in that bag. Hand it over.
I understand that searching people he finds suspicious was part of his job, but the way he spoke to people was impossible to overlook. Whether my husband was actually acting suspicious to begin with was a problem of its own.
I couldn't find anything. What a shame. Go on, get out of here.
After rifling through my husband's personal belongings, he had thrown the bag back at him, seemingly disappointed that nothing had come up. He didn't even apologize properly to my husband. Another time when my son Ryo was on his way home from playing with his friends, Yabu had caught him and told him,
Hey kid, you shouldn't be running around at this time of night.
Sorry, sir. The sun hadn't even set yet. It wasn't that ridiculous a time for children to be out alone. If this was the city, it might have made a little more sense, but we lived in the suburbs. Being shouted at so suddenly by an adult for something he had never once been warned about shocked Ryo. One more incident occurred when I was walking around town, shopping for groceries. I was about to turn a corner when something zoomed into my vision. It was Yabu, riding on a bike.
Watch where you're going, Grandma!
He hadn't bothered to stop or even slowed down turning a corner, and almost crashed right into me. He laid the blame on me, shouting that it was my fault, and then disappeared. His attitude made him no different from the kind of thug you'd find in a street gang. I was terrified by what had happened, but it wasn't just me and my family. Everyone in the neighborhood had experienced something unpleasant by Yabu, so he had become infamous in our area for his bad attitude and questionable actions. Honey, do you have some time? I'm sorry to bother you while you're at work.
What's the matter? Are you okay?
This time he called out to Mio.
She's just a high school student. What did he want? Did he want to check her bags?
If only. He didn't check her bags or do anything like shout at her. It seems like he had a different motive than when he was dealing with us.
What do you mean?
Well, I think he was hitting on our daughter.
Huh? But he's a police officer.
I'm not entirely sure either. I tried asking Mio what they spoke about, but she says she doesn't want to talk about it.
Really? Then I'll try speaking to her when I get home. Sorry, honey. I've got to go back to work. Can we continue this later?
You're right. I'm sorry I've bothered you.
Don't worry about it. I'll try to get home as early as possible.
That day when I was on my way home from shopping, I found my daughter standing on the sidewalk. I guessed that she must have been on her way home from club activities, and I was about to call out to her when I realized that she wasn't alone. Yabu was with her.
Oh, really? You just finished club activities. High school students have it really tough, huh?
Yeah. Can I go now? I've got to go home. Yabu was being overly familiar and edging closer to Mio. On the other hand, Mio looked troubled and was doing her best to keep a distance. Excuse me, I'm this girl's mother. Do you have some business with my daughter?
It's none of your business.
I saw fear flash in his eyes the second I announced who I was. When I asked my daughter, she explained that Yabu had stopped her when she was on her way home. She had no idea what she'd done, but it seemed that he wasn't interested in lecturing her.
You're in the tennis club? That must be a lot of fun. I'd really like to see you in that cute outfit. I bet it suits you. Do you have a boyfriend? Have you decided what you're going to do after you graduate? I can give you some one-on-one advice if you want.
And wouldn't let her go until she answered. It disgusted me that he had spoken to her in such a softer tone than he had done with the rest of us. I was scared for my daughter. He was looking at me all over and moving closer whenever I tried to move away. He was really creeping me out. I don't want to think about it anymore. Can we go home? Mio had gone pale and was still trembling, so I stopped myself from asking any more questions. I couldn't believe what I had seen. A grown man, a police officer no less, trying to hit on my daughter.
He's a terrible guy, but he's still a police officer. I don't think he would do anything to a high school student.
Yeah, you're right. I must be overthinking things. No matter how rude or irresponsible he was, Yabu was still an officer of the law. My husband and I came to the conclusion that he wouldn't dare do anything to break it. Unfortunately, Yabu soon proved to us that he wasn't worthy of our trust. He was far more irresponsible and lacking in morals than we had imagined. He did something we could have never imagined. It happened only a few days after I had spoken with my husband. I got a phone call from my daughter when I was in the kitchen preparing everyone's dinner. Mom! You have to come over quick! Mr. Makashima's going to get hurt! What's the matter? What's going on? I'll explain later. You've got to come to Mr. Makashima's house. Hurry! I had no idea what was going on, but I had no choice but to run down the street to Mr. Makashima's. When I arrived, Mr. Makashima and Yabu were face to face, clearly in the middle of a heated discussion. I could see Mio behind Mr. Makashima, panicking. What's going on? What happened? My daughter realized that I had arrived and came over to where I was to explain the situation. She'd been walking home, taking the same path she always did when Yabu stopped her outside of Mr. Makashima's house. Then he had demanded something unbelievable from her.
Recently, we've been getting a lot of reports of thefts at a store near the station. It's a store used mainly by high school students at this time of day, so I'm afraid I'll have to conduct a body check to see if you've got anything on you.
I ignored her refusal and her request for a female officer, and had begun to touch her without her consent, sliding his hands all over her body. She told me that she could tell by the way he was touching her that he had only one thing in mind. He had used the words body check as an excuse to molest my daughter. Stop it! Please! Yabu had only grinned and used more excuses to defend his actions. Not only that...
Are you sure you want to stop me? Don't you know it's a crime to get in the way of police duties?
He had threatened her and grabbed her arm. However, right at that moment, Mr. Makashima's door had opened.
What are you doing? Didn't you hear her? She said she doesn't want you touching her! Let go of her right now!
Mr. Makishima had come to the defense of my daughter, putting himself between her and Yabu. After hearing everything that had happened, I glared at Yabu. If I could hit him, punch him, tear at his hair, I would have done so happily. But Mio was shivering behind me, gripping onto my clothes. To think that a police officer would do something as vile as touch a minor without her consent. It was beyond saving. Mio must have been so terrified.
I was watching you from the second floor. I saw what you were doing to Mio. You may have been lacking in morals, but you're still a police officer. I can't believe that you would be stupid enough to sexually assault a young girl without understanding the consequences.
However, Yabu only laughed at him.
Sexual assault? What the hell are you talking about? I haven't done anything like that. I've only done what I had to do. My job. Do you have any proof that I did anything to her? If you don't have anything, nobody will believe you.
The way he spoke and the phrases he poured from his mouth were all textbook criminal. Usually in these sorts of complicated situations, you'd call the police and it would be their job to find out who was lying, but an officer was right in front of us.
Hey, old man, keep your nose out of this. If you keep on interfering, I'll make up some crime to frame you with and take you with me to the station. I know. I can arrest you for the recent thefts. I haven't got any leads anyway. So are you sure you want to continue arguing with me?
Yabu had announced his second crime without a second's hesitation. My daughter and I were too afraid to say anything to stop him. What could we do when the person that was supposed to uphold the law was breaking it? On the other hand, Mr. Makishima was smiling. I could swear he was chuckling to himself. Even in this hopeless situation. And it was possible that he would be arrested and put behind bars unlawfully. Seeing Mr. Makishima's composure must have gotten to Yabu, because he suddenly thrust out his arms and grabbed Mr. Makishima by the collar.
Stop laughing, you son of a...
Stop that!
Do you think this is funny? I'm not kidding. I will throw you in jail. Yui, thank you. It's okay. Leave this to me. I won't let him hurt either of you.
Mr. Makishima stopped me from speaking. I understood that it was because he didn't want Yabu's focus to turn back to Mio, so I decided to keep quiet. Then all of a sudden I heard a police siren wailing, and it wasn't long before a patrol car stopped right before us.
I called someone before I came downstairs.
But Mr. Makishima, we can't trust the police. They'll just defend Yabu and cover up what happened. To us, any other police officer was just one more accomplice that hadn't done anything to stop or prevent Yabu running free. As my daughter and I glanced at one another, a middle-aged man got out of the car. When Yabu saw who had arrived, he went pale and shrieked.
Chief? What are you doing here?
Even civilians like my daughter and I could understand how important the man was when we heard the word chief. But we couldn't understand what a man with such an important position was doing in a place like this. Would a chief of police usually answer 911 calls? I looked at Mio again and we both shrugged our shoulders in unison. The chief rushed over to where Mr. Makishima was and began apologizing profusely. He greeted Mr. Makishima with a loud, clear voice and saluted him. Mr. Makishima nodded with the man's words and responded.
It's good to see you, sir. It's a shame we had to meet like this. But I'm extremely sorry for the trouble this idiot has caused you. How nostalgic.
He smiled warmly and laughed as he usually did, but the rest of us had no idea what was going on. Yabu was just as confused as me and my daughter were, and seeing that, the chief walked over to where he was and slapped him on the head.
Ow! Damn it! What the hell are you doing? You idiot! Mr. Makishima was the commissioner before me. He was my senior. What?
The chief began to talk about Mr. Makishima as his time as the chief of police. Mr. Makishima was currently retired, but formerly he had been a decorated officer in his day and was well known in the force for his spectacular career.
So what? He's retired! His career doesn't mean anything anymore! That doesn't matter. Mr. Makishima contacted me directly. I know that he wouldn't have done that unless it was an emergency. Of course I'd come down here and see things for myself. What the hell did you do?
Even though he had retired, Mr. Makishima had a lot of acquaintances at the station, and many of them, if not all, respected him for his dedication to his job. It meant that he still had a strong influence over the local police force. With one phone call, he had managed to call out the chief. That was more than enough to explain how much power he still had.
Sir, if it's no trouble, could you tell me what led you to call me? I'd like to know the details of what happened to you. It's pretty serious. It's an embarrassment to the entire police force. And if I could, I'd like to forget it and never speak of it again. But something needs to be done. A lot of improvements are necessary to make sure this never happens again.
And so Mr. Makishima explained everything that had happened, in detail to the chief. Not just about the assault on my daughter, but about all of the things Yabu had done until now. All of his bad deeds had come to light, and Yabu was becoming paler by the second. Any one of his deeds could have proven how unfit he was to be a police officer, but putting them all together damned him. The chief was furious and didn't hold back when he spoke to Yabu.
What have you done? You assaulted a minor?
Yabu wouldn't accept responsibility for his misconduct that easily. I didn't think he could go any lower.
So what? He's retired! His career doesn't mean anything anymore! He just made all of that up! Former commissioner? I don't care if he used to be the president of the United States! He doesn't have any proof that I did any of those things! It's true that I don't have any proof in regards to what I've heard from people in town. Everyone has something to say about you, but not many will have evidence. See? You're getting old, Grandpa! Why don't you go back inside and stay in there?
But he began to accuse Mr. Makishima of lying. The chief hit Yabu once more. It's a mystery how he managed to become a police officer with an attitude like this. A young man like this was being accepted for a job that was supposed to involve protecting people, and I only had worries for this country's future. Mr. Makishima was smiling. He still had something up his sleeve to deal with Yabu.
So, what happened after that?
Yabu was still going on about how none of us had evidence, and that he hadn't done anything, and told us that he had security cameras installed above his door. He warned Yabu that he might have footage of him attacking Mio, and Yabu shut right up.
As expected of Mr. Makishima. No wonder he was a former chief. He's our savior! So, did you find something on the recordings?
Clear as day, he couldn't make any excuses after watching the recording. It just pains me that Mio had to endure something like that before he could finally be held accountable.
You're right. If I was there, I probably would have tried to punch the nasty smirk off of his face.
I'm not so sure about the police, though. They've lost a lot of trust from the neighborhood. There were a lot of people watching when Yabu was arrested. It was a strange sight when he was pushed into the back of a patrol car.
He deserves to be judged for what he's done. Finally, it was a long time coming. I'm just glad that he's not running around on the loose anymore. He needs to be locked up so that nobody else has to suffer. We owe a lot to Mr. Makishima. I'm still surprised that he used to be the police.
Mio and I were surprised too. The current chief was apologizing and calling him sir the entire time. Mr. Makishima's always really gentle and kind, but you never know. He might have been pretty scary back in the day.
Ah, you're right. They say it's not a good idea to anger someone who's usually really mild-tempered. I guess we know why.
Thanks to Mr. Makishima, we had footage of Yabu assaulting my daughter. It was clear in the recordings that he had grabbed Mio when she was trying to back away from him, and that it was way too much touching for it to be a simple body check. It was the first time I had ever felt so much anger towards someone in my life, as a mother and as a woman. If I was allowed, I wanted to punch him and hurt him, to take my rage out on him. But it was my sense of a human being that stopped me from acting on my feelings, and the law exists to punish people who break it. I'd be waiting for the law to deal out the necessary punishment for Yabu. With the footage and Mr. Makishima's statement as a witness, Yabu was arrested on charges of sexually assaulting a minor. I couldn't punish Yabu myself, but the court had found Yabu guilty, and he was going to get the punishment he deserved. As a matter of course, he lost his job, his name and face was put up all over the news, and he was alienated by everyone who knew him socially. It'll take a lot of time before he can regain a lot of the people's trust, let alone come back to society. The chief and several other ranked officers came to our house to apologize in person to our daughter. Miho knew exactly what she wanted to say, and I was so proud to hear it. I wasn't the only one that suffered because of that man. That so-called officer of yours went around town going through people's belongings with no good reason at all. He shouted at small kids about their curfew before sundown and was riding on a bike through town without any care for pedestrians or even the traffic law. He shouted at my mother after almost crashing into her when he was clearly in the wrong. He was unreasonable and even dangerous. It was a miracle that no one else was hurt by his reckless behavior. Before doubting his ability to be a police officer, it's a wonder that nobody ever doubted his ability as a regular human being. I think that there are a lot of people in this town who say that they don't trust the police anymore. The next officer assigned here is going to suffer a lot because of his predecessor. Mio had stirred up the courage to say what needed to be said to the officers, who were all so much older and bigger than she was. And it's not just me that feels the same way. I'm sure that everyone in the neighborhood would be cheering her if they heard what she had said. The speech she had given the officers was a summarization of everything everyone in town was thinking.
I'm truly very sorry. You're absolutely right. We're responsible for not realizing what kind of person he was sooner, and for not managing him properly. You have every right to lecture us, but I assure you, we won't make the same mistake. We'll take a lot of care in choosing the next officer we assign to this area. Not only that, we'll be sure to reevaluate the way we interview and train new officers. A lot of things will have to change. I understand that it'll take a lot of effort and hard work to regain this town's trust, but I hope that you'll give us one more chance.
He apologized sincerely and even appealed to my daughter that he was dedicated to keeping his word. We'll have to wait and see if things really do change. She didn't waste any time and went straight back to her room. A while after, a new officer was assigned to the local station. The name Makashima was stitched above his chest pocket. I could tell by his surname, and by the way he smiled, that he was related to Mr. Makashima. So it was no surprise when he told me that he was Mr. Makashima's grandson.
My name is Shugo Makishima. I'll be stationed in this area as of today. I'll be working hard to win back your trust in the police. And of course, to protect all of the citizens living in this town. I hope that I can meet your expectations.
I never knew that Mr. Makashima's grandson was a police officer.
It seems that Human Resources had a lot of trouble deciding who to assign to this area, considering everything that's happened and the pressure that the officer here will have to bear. But I nominated myself for the position.
But why would you do that? You must know how tough it'll be here.
I was born and raised here. My grandfather lives here. I've always looked up to him, respected him. That's part of the reason why I became a police officer. But one of my colleagues came to this town and caused a lot of pain here. I couldn't forgive that, and I wanted to do what I could help. I don't want this town to suffer anymore, and I don't want the people that live here to think that they can't rely on the police anymore.
Because of Yabu, a lot of people in this town have become allergic, even hateful to the police. But if the new officer is Mr. Makashima's grandson, I'm sure things will be different. Ever since my daughter was assaulted, everyone has looked up to Mr. Makashima as the town hero who revealed Yabu's true nature to the police. He's become the man of the times, and if it's his grandson, I'm sure there are a lot of people who will come to accept the new officer. However, it won't be that easy or that fast. We've already learned our lesson on what happens when a person in a position of power abuses that power.
Hey, is this the soccer ball you were looking for?
Yeah, that's it! Thank you!
It's okay for you to play, but make sure it doesn't fly out of the park again, alright? You've got a pretty strong kick there.
Yeah, sure. He was proactive when it came to talking with the children in the neighborhood and was very careful when it came to patrols. Because of his childhood spent here, he was informed about the geography of the town. And I often found him giving direction to the people on the street. Even Mio, who had suffered the most because of Yabu, was approving of Mr. Makashima's grandson and was praising him a lot. He's the sweetest person ever. I swear I was going to move out if the next person was no different to Yabu, but this changes things. She was extremely relieved, and I'm glad to hear that she didn't have any problems with him. And I still take him some dinner every now and then. If anything, we've all become a lot closer ever since he saved Miu, and he's a lot more like family now. I often find him spending time with his grandson when Shugo's on his day off. Miu's been coming with me a lot more often to visit Mr. Makashima, and I suspect Shugo. I wonder if Shugo's got a girlfriend. Oh, what, are you interested? It's not like that. He's just a bit good-looking, that's all. And he's really kind, too. Well, he's a police officer, after all. I don't think he'll be interested in girls who aren't adults yet. You might have to wait a little longer. I know, right? I guess I'll have to use my time wisely. Considering he had gotten a girl with a police officer allergy to fall in love with him, he was doing a really good job. He's going to be a lot of trouble for the girls in this town for a completely different reason to Yabu. He might just end up stealing the first crush of everyone in the vicinity. But now I'm sure that he's responsible enough to not do anything about it. Thank goodness. Sorry, kids, you'll all have to be patient.